Billionaire family mocked a black CEO on stage minutes later. Their $1 to-be deal disappeared. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. You missed a spot made. The laughter cracked through the ballroom like breaking glass. Amina Cole didn't move. She sat straight, drenched in gold light and spilled champagne. Her white silk dress clung to her like armor that refused to surrender. The air smelled of wealth and wine and something rotten beneath it. Richard Kingsley, heir to the Kingsley Empire, leaned over with a grin too wide for his face. He tilted the bottle again. More champagne poured down her hair, slow and deliberate. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Then came laughter, sharper, uglier. "Worthless maid here," someone shouted. Phones went up. Screens glowed. Someone whispered, "Post it. Let's see how far it goes." Amina reached for her phone. Calm, precise. "Cancel the $1.2 billion deal," she said. Her voice didn't rise. It cut. On the other end, a woman's voice answered, steady as glass. "Confirmed, ma'am." Amina's eyes stayed on the man with the bottle. Confirmed. That one word hit harder than any shout could. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now back to Amina Cole. Moments earlier, no one had noticed her walk in. The only black woman in a sea of champagne gowns and tuxedos. No jewelry. No entourage. Just grace and quiet. They saw simplicity and mistook it for servitude. Richard chuckled, swirling the bottle. "You people never learn." His wife, draped in red silk, lifted her phone. "Smile for us." Amina didn't. She simply stared through the lens, expressionless, as if she could already see their future collapsing frame by frame. Every flash captured the wrong moment, the cruelty, not the consequence. At the edge of the stage, a young journalist named Maya Brooks froze mid-recording. Her screen showed Amina's face, then her memory filled the rest. Forbes Women of Power, 2024. The same woman. The visionary behind Arvia Systems. Maya's breath caught. "Oh my God," she whispered. Because in that ballroom, dripping with arrogance and gold, the woman they called maid had just erased a billion-dollar empire with one call. 5 minutes earlier, before the laughter, the ballroom had been flawless. Crystal chandeliers glittered like frozen suns. Waiters glided between tables set with gold-plated cutlery. The Kingsley family stood at the center, basking in applause, ready to sign a partnership that would merge their luxury conglomerate with Arvia Systems, unaware that the very CEO they were waiting for was already in the room quietly, watching. Amina Cole stood by the side table, a simple clutch in her hand, blending in with the catering staff. She was observing them, not hiding, testing them. Every word, every gesture, all part of a prelude she had learned to recognize long ago. Richard Kingsley Jr., mid-30 seconds, polished, loud, loved attention more than air. His wife, Victoria Perfection, sculpted by wealth, carried a glass of champagne like a weapon. His mother, Eleanor Kingsley, the matriarch, smiled from the stage, giving her annual speech about ethics, vision, and the future of enterprise. But Amina had done her homework. Behind those smiles were court settlements, NDAs, and a pattern of quiet exploitation. Tonight was not a celebration, it was an audit dressed as a gala. From across the room, Richard Jr. noticed her, the lone black woman, not clapping, not laughing. His smirk said everything. "Hey, sweetheart, grab us another bottle." "Yeah," Amina turned her head slowly. "Excuse me," he laughed. "Come on, be useful. Champagne over here." The people around him chuckled, grateful to be part of his orbit. Amina didn't answer. She simply stepped closer, her heels soft against marble. When she reached the table, she set the unopened bottle down gently, not before her phone screen flashed, once board monitoring live. Richard didn't notice. He waved his hand like a king dismissing a servant. "There you go. You know, if you're going to sneak into high-profile events, at least wear black and white like the staff. Not white silk. That's confusing." The crowd laughed again, polite and poisonous. Amina inhaled slow. She'd heard that tone before at 22 at her first investor pitch when they'd mistaken her for an intern. At 28, when a banker asked who her real boss was. That sound of entitlement disguised as humor was universal. But tonight she wasn't here to defend herself. She was here to record them. Her assistant's voice had said it that morning. If they show you who they are, don't argue. Just let the cameras run. Near the back, Maya Brooks adjusted her lens. Something about the woman in white pulled her focus. Calm, composed, like a storm waiting for the right wind. And then came the moment Richard's voice too loud, the laughter too long, and the bottle tipped. Champagne rained down. The first drop hit Amina's shoulder. By the time the last one fell, the Kingsley's empire had already started to drown. The champagne hit the floor like applause for cruelty. For 3 long seconds, no one breathed. Then the laughter came again, softer, this time uneasy. Even the pianist at the corner faltered, his melody collapsing into silence. Amina sat there, glistening under chandelier light. Drops traced the curve of her jaw, falling into her lap one by one. She didn't wipe them away. She let them stay. Proof, not pain. Richard Kingsley tried to fill the tension with another joke. "Guess she's not used to fine wine," he said, turning toward his audience. But his words landed flat. A few forced laughs. A few eyes turning away. Victoria Kingsley whispered, "Rich, stop. You're making it worse," he scoffed. "Relax. She's not even supposed to be here." Across the room, the event photographer lowered his camera. "That's enough, sir," he muttered under his breath. The microphone on stage picked it up just enough for a few guests to hear. And that's when the shift began, quiet, invisible, unstoppable. Maya Brooks' phone in hand zoomed in. Her screen trembled as she whispered, "It's her. It's really her." The colleague beside her frowned. Who Maya didn't blink. Amina Cole, the CEO of Arvia Systems. The words spread fast, carried in murmurs across the tables. The CEO, the one funding this, no, can't be. She's not, look at her. It's her. Richard caught the whisper's irritation replacing his smirk. "What's everyone looking at?" he barked. He turned toward Amina, still seated, still silent. "You should leave before I have security." Her phone buzzed once on the table. The screen flashed, transaction confirmed. Amina looked up, eyes calm as stone. "You won't need to call anyone," she said softly. He frowned. "What did you just—" Behind him, the LED wall glitched. The Kingsley Arvia logo froze mid-animation, then flickered. The line beneath it, joint venture signing ceremony, blinked twice and disappeared. In its place, a single notification appeared in stark white letters, "Merger canceled effective immediately." The crowd gasped. A waiter dropped a tray. Glasses shattered across marble. Victoria stepped back, her voice cracking. "Richard, what's happening?" He turned toward the stage, confusion melting into panic. "Who did that?" Amina rose, slow, and composed, champagne dripping from her sleeve. "That would be me," she said. Her voice carried through the hush like a verdict. Eleanor Kingsley, the matriarch, tried to recover the room. "There must be some mistake," Amina met her eyes. "The only mistake," she said, "was thinking power looks like you." Maya's camera stayed locked on her, the red recording light steady. The moment had turned. Amina walked past the table, leaving wet footprints on the marble. No one stopped her. No one dared. By the time she reached the exit, the laughter was gone, replaced by the sound of deals collapsing in real time. The ballroom that had shimmered moments ago now felt colder, smaller. Phones buzzed across the tables, alerts stacking one after another. Arvia withdraws from merger. 1.2 billion deal terminated. The digital panic spread faster than sound. Eleanor Kingsley gripped the edge of the podium, her pearls trembling. "Someone fix that screen," she snapped, voice sharp enough to slice through the air. But no one moved. The tech crew was frozen eyes, darting between their monitors and the woman walking calmly toward the exit. Amina's heels clicked against marble, deliberate, unhurried. Every step was a sentence. Richard Kingsley found his voice again, loud and brittle. "You think you can walk out after humiliating us? You have no idea who you're dealing with." Amina stopped, turned slightly, just enough for the gold light to catch her soaked hair. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," she said, "and so does the board." Her phone vibrated again. A notification glowed on the screen. "Board statement released live in 2 minutes." Richard lunged forward, hand half raised as if trying to grab control from thin air. "You can't," Eleanor's voice cut him off. "Richard," but it was too late. Cameras flashed. Microphones caught everything. From the back of the room, Maya Brooks kept filming, whispering into her mic. She just ended a billion-dollar merger without raising her voice. This is history. Amina's eyes scanned the crowd, the investors, influencers, journalists, each one now realizing what they'd witnessed wasn't scandal but consequence. "You were going to sell my technology," she said quietly, "and use it to automate layoffs in every Arvia subsidiary. You wanted profit without people." She turned to Eleanor. You called that innovation? I call it erasure. Eleanor's lips parted, but no sound came. Amina stepped closer. I came here tonight to give you one last chance to show integrity. You showed cruelty instead. Behind her, the massive LED screen blinked again, now displaying live news coverage. A headline scrolled, Arvia CEO cancels deal over racial humiliation at gala. The audience gasped as the live stream cameras panned across their faces. Richard's bravado evaporated. This isn't fair, he stammered. Amina tilted her head slightly. Neither was the way you poured that drink. Security at the door straightened, uncertain whether to block or salute her. Amina gave a nod. Let them handle their own mess, she said, stepping past them. Outside the ballroom, the night air was crisp, quiet, the kind of silence that follows judgment. Behind her, voices collided, apologies, excuses, panic. Maya followed her out, camera still rolling. Miss Cole, she called softly. What do you want people to remember from tonight? Amina paused at the top of the marble steps. The city lights reflected in her eyes like stars and fire mixed. That dignity doesn't need volume, she said. It only needs truth. And then she walked into the night, the echo of her footsteps louder than every word spoken inside. By sunrise, the video had already gone viral. 67 million views, 14 million shares. Every frame of Amina Cole's silent defiance replayed across timelines, boardrooms, and morning talk shows. The Kingsley family's PR team scrambled to control the narrative. But you can't control a truth spoken in calm. It doesn't shout. It settles in. Inside a glass-walled newsroom in downtown New York, journalist Maya Brooks sat across from Amina. The same woman she'd filmed 12 hours earlier now sat dry, composed, radiant in a navy suit that looked like authority tailored into fabric. Cameras rolled, the red light glowing steady. Miss Cole, Maya began, you ended a billion-dollar merger in front of the people who mocked you. Why Amina's eyes didn't flinch. Because money without respect is debt, she said, and I don't owe anyone that kind of balance. Maya nodded slowly. Some call your decision impulsive. Others say it's the boldest act of corporate integrity in a decade. I didn't do it to trend, Amina replied. I did it because silence only has value if it's chosen, not forced. The studio fell quiet for a moment. Even the sound engineers paused. Maya leaned forward. Were you testing them? Amina looked through the glass at the skyline outside towers glinting in early light. Testing them, no. I was documenting them. Power doesn't reveal character. Disrespect does. The control room producer mouthed to Maya, perfect. Across the city, the Kingsleys were unraveling. Eleanor's scheduled charity appearance was canceled. Richard's face plastered every news ticker with captions like, Air faces fallout after humiliation scandal. Stock prices dipped, then plummeted. Back in the newsroom, Maya hesitated before her last question. When you told your assistant to cancel the deal, did you know it would trigger this kind of storm? Amina smiled faintly. I knew it would rain. I didn't expect thunder. Maya chuckled softly, but her eyes glistened. People are calling it a turning point for women, for black leadership, for corporate accountability. Amina shook her head gently. No, it's just a mirror. The real turning point is what people decide to see when they look into it. For a beat, neither spoke. The city hummed beyond the glass. Then Amina stood, shook Maya's hand, and said, Thank you for showing the whole story, not just the moment they spilled the drink. Maya smiled. That's the part everyone needed to see, how you never raised your voice once. Amina gathered her notes, slid on her sunglasses, and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, the reflection caught her face, calm, untouchable, already legend. Down below, reporters waited by the entrance, shouting her name. But Amina didn't stop. Because when justice finally speaks for itself, there's nothing left to explain, only the sound of footsteps leaving history behind. By the second day, the Kingsley name had turned from legacy to liability. Stock analysts called it the fastest reputation collapse in modern business. Every investor who once toasted to their dynasty now drafted exit clauses before breakfast. Inside the Kingsley penthouse, the family sat around a long mahogany table that suddenly felt more like a witness stand. Eleanor at the head, stiff as a marble statue. Richard pacing near the window, tie loose, voice raw. Victoria scrolling through endless headlines that all began the same, the family that mocked the wrong woman. She made a fool out of us, Richard snapped, slamming his phone down. She'll pay for this. Eleanor's reply was low but razor sharp. She didn't make a fool out of you, Richard. You volunteered. Silence. Victoria looked up, eyes hollow. Do we apologize publicly? Eleanor exhaled through her nose. We don't apologize, we fix. But even she knew it was too late. The Arvia withdrawal had triggered an SEC review, a dozen journalists digging into the family's offshore ventures, and 3 lawsuits from former employees suddenly finding their voices. Richard turned back toward the skyline. The same view that once symbolized his power now looked like a verdict. She set us up, he muttered. She came there to ruin us. Eleanor's gaze didn't soften. She came there to see who we really were. And we told her. Meanwhile, at Arvia headquarters, Amina sat in a sleek boardroom surrounded by her executive team. The atmosphere was calm, controlled the opposite of the chaos outside. Her assistant read the reports aloud. Public sentiment 91% positive. Investors reaffirming. New proposals from 3 firms in Europe. Amina nodded. Prepare responses. We'll review only those with diversity commitments written into their governance. Her tone was even no triumph, no spite, just order being restored. The head of communications asked softly, "Do you want to release a personal statement?" Amina leaned back, thoughtful. "No." The video said everything. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number," she answered. "Miss Cole speaking." A trembling voice. "This is Victoria Kingsley. Please. My husband wants to meet." To apologize, Amina's expression didn't change. "Tell him power isn't a dinner invitation." She hung up gently, then turned to her team. "Schedule the quarterly review. Let's get back to work." Outside the glass walls, reporters shouted questions into microphones. None of them could see her smile, small, private, certain. Back in the Kingsley penthouse, Richard threw another tantrum, shouting about lawyers and image repair. Eleanor simply stared at the silent television screen, looping the clip of Amina sitting drenched but unmoved. She whispered almost to herself, "We taught our sons to own everything but their mistakes." For the first time, the Kingsley matriarch didn't look powerful. She looked haunted, because for the first time she understood the empire wasn't lost to scandal. It was lost to dignity. 3 days later, the Kingsley Towers executive boardroom smelled like fear dressed in cologne. Lawyers filled the left side, PR, handlers the right. The once imposing family sat at the center of a table designed for triumph, now surrounded by documents marked internal investigation. The monitors on the wall streamed muted news coverage, Amina Cole's poised image on every channel. Beneath her photo, a headline that refused to disappear, the silence that changed corporate America. Eleanor sat perfectly still, hands folded. Her diamonds looked heavier than ever. Richard leaned forward, voice sharp. "We can't let her destroy us in the court of public opinion. We need to sue her." A lawyer coughed lightly. "For what, sir? Emotional damage caused by your own behavior." Laughter didn't follow. "Only the sound of an empire creaking," Victoria whispered. "She hasn't said a word since that night. Not a single tweet, not a press quote, nothing." Eleanor turned her head slowly. "That's because she doesn't need to. The more we speak, the smaller we sound." Outside the tower, a crowd had gathered, journalists, protesters, employees demanding accountability. Some carried signs reading "Respect isn't optional." Others simply held photos of Amina in that white dress, head, high eyes, steady. Inside, a consultant presented the data on a tablet. "Your luxury division is collapsing. The hospitality brand lost 4 major partners. Social media engagement is down 87%. There's talk of a full board vote to remove the Kingsley family from operational control." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "They wouldn't dare." The consultant hesitated. "They already scheduled the vote." Richard shot up from his chair. "We built this name," Eleanor replied, quiet but lethal. And she reminded the world what it was built on. For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of the city outside filled the void. Then the lawyer's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, paled, and turned it toward Eleanor. A new article headline glowing like a verdict. "Arvia Systems launches fund for women of color in leadership, backed by global donors." A photograph accompanied it. Amina standing beside Maya Brooks, both smiling beneath a banner that read, "The Reclamation Initiative." Victoria's hand trembled. "She's turning our shame into purpose." Eleanor exhaled, barely a whisper. "She's turning our cruelty into her legacy." Downstairs, the protesters began to chant her name. "Amina, Amina, Amina." Eleanor rose slowly, her chair scraping against marble. "We're not fighting her anymore," she said almost to herself. "We're fighting gravity. And no one wins against that." Richard looked lost, hollow, smaller than ever. For the first time in his life, he realized silence could be louder than apology. And in that boardroom filled with wealth, what echoed loudest wasn't a voice, but the sound of everything they'd built beginning to come undone. A week later, the headlines had shifted from scandal to movement. What began as humiliation in a ballroom had become a ripple across the world. At the heart of downtown Atlanta, a stage stood beneath a clean white banner, the Reclamation Initiative, empowering women of color in leadership. Hundreds gathered executives, students, journalists, and everyday people who saw themselves in that single moment of silent defiance. Amina Cole stepped onto the stage. No music, no grand entrance, just quiet footsteps and the sound of cameras clicking. The air trembled with anticipation. Maya Brooks stood nearby, microphone in hand, moderating the event. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, the woman who reminded the world that power doesn't shout, it acts. Applause erupted, not loud, but long. Amina smiled, small, controlled. She looked across the audience, faces of every shade, staring back, many with tears they didn't bother to hide. She began softly. "When I walked into that ballroom, I didn't expect a revolution. I expected respect. But sometimes the lack of it becomes the spark we need." She let the words settle. The room quieted again. "I didn't build Arvia to make noise," she continued. "I built it to make room. For voices that were dismissed, overlooked, ignored." A woman in the front row nodded, mouthing the words, "Thank you." Amina noticed. She always noticed. "The Reclamation Initiative," she said, gesturing to the banner, "isn't about me. It's about what we do next. Every donation, every mentorship, every board seat that opens to someone who's never been invited, that's how we win." Maya looked up from her notes. "Miss Cole, what would you say to those who still believe silence means weakness?" Amina's expression didn't change. "Silence only becomes weakness when it's empty. Mine wasn't." The crowd murmured, absorbing each word like oxygen. She continued. "When they poured that drink, they didn't just humiliate me. They revealed themselves. And I did the only thing power should ever do, hold a mirror." A ripple of applause grew into thunder. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the first grants approved under the Initiative scholarships for young women, investments in Black-owned startups, leadership programs in underrepresented communities. Maya stepped back, letting Amina own the moment. Amina closed her speech simply, "You don't have to fight to be seen. You just have to stand long enough for the truth to find its audience." She looked over the crowd one last time. And for the first time since that night, she smiled, not the polite smile of a CEO, but the kind of smile that belongs to someone who already forgave the world, yet never stopped demanding it do better. The audience rose to their feet. Applause rolled like thunder through the hall, not for her victory, but for what she turned it into, a blueprint for dignity. That same afternoon across town, the Kingsley mansion was drowning in silence. No more guests, no more press conferences, just the hum of an air conditioner trying to fill a space where power used to live. Richard sat at the grand piano, pressing random keys, not music, just noise. His wife, Victoria, scrolled through her phone until she found the live stream of Amina's speech. The screen light flickered across her face. "She's magnificent," Victoria whispered. Richard shot her a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "She's manipulative. You think this is noble? She destroyed our family." Victoria didn't flinch. "No, Richard. You did that when you opened your mouth." Upstairs, Eleanor Kingsley stood by a tall window staring out at the estate lawn where reporters once waited for her statements. She hadn't left the house in days. On the table behind her lay a letter handwritten to deliberate her first public apology in 40 years of business. She'd written and rewritten it a dozen times. Still, it sounded hollow. She picked up the paper again. "To Miss Amina Cole, we extend our deepest regrets for the events that occurred at the Horizon Gala." She stopped reading aloud. Even her own voice didn't believe it. At that moment, her assistant entered hesitant. "Ma'am, CNN is requesting a live interview to respond to her new initiative." Eleanor folded the letter carefully. "No, not today. Let the world hear her first." In the reflection of the window, she caught her own eyes, tired, brittle. "Do you know what hurts most?" she asked softly. The assistant shook her head. That she didn't need revenge, just a pause. And that pause was enough to end us. Downstairs, Richard was already pacing again, phone pressed to his ear. "We'll sue for defamation." "For breach of," his lawyer interrupted through the speaker. "There's no breach, Mr. Kingsley." She canceled legally before signing. "You're out of leverage." Richard threw the phone onto the marble floor. It cracked, another sound of things breaking under their own arrogance. Victoria stood and quietly left the room. Outside, camera crews had begun taking down their equipment. Even scandal fatigue had set in. Eleanor descended the stairs, pausing beside her son. "Do you want to save this family?" she asked. "Of course. Then learn the one lesson she taught you for free. Listen when you've already lost." He didn't answer. Pride still filled the silence where humility should have been. Later that evening, Eleanor sealed the apology letter but never sent it. She placed it in a drawer marked private correspondence beside photos of her late husband and the first Kingsley contract ever signed. She closed the drawer slowly. Outside, lightning rolled across the horizon, silent and electric. And for the first time in her life, Eleanor Kingsley understood what it meant to be on the other side of power, where silence wasn't control anymore, it was consequence. 3 nights later, rain swept through the city, steady cleansing like the universe hitting reset. At Arvia's downtown headquarters, the lights still glowed. Amina worked alone, reviewing proposals for the next phase of the reclamation initiative. The skyline shimmered behind her, not as a symbol of power, but of reach. Her assistant Nia entered quietly. "Ma'am, there's a courier here. Hand-delivered envelope. No sender listed." Amina looked up. At this hour, Nia nodded. "It's from the Kingsley estate." Amina took the envelope, its seal embossed in gold, the kind of old wealth that tried to speak through stationery. She didn't open it immediately. Instead, she set it beside her laptop, finished signing 2 digital agreements, then turned back. When she finally tore it open, the scent of paper and regret filled the air. To Miss Amina Cole, it began. "I have spent my entire life believing control was the highest form of dignity. I was wrong. Dignity belongs to those who can stand still when the world tries to bend them. You taught me that without saying a word. For what my family did, I am deeply sorry." Signed, Eleanor Kingsley. Amina read it twice. Her face didn't change, but her breath did a quiet, controlled exhale. She folded the letter back, slipped it into a folder marked documentation, and whispered, "Acknowledged." Nia, standing nearby, hesitated. "Are you going to respond?" Amina shook her head. "The world already heard my response." Outside, thunder rolled gently, the kind that announces peace, not storm. Her screen pinged with a new email, a press request from Forbes, subject line, "Silent Power Amina Cole redefines leadership." She smiled faintly, then clicked decline. "This isn't about press," she murmured. "It's about precedent." Nia watched her carefully. "Do you ever wish you'd confronted them differently?" Amina turned toward the window, city lights flickering on her reflection. "No, you don't teach arrogance with anger. You teach it with consequence." She picked up her pen and wrote a single note at the bottom of Eleanor's letter: "Forgiveness doesn't require return mail." Then she filed it away, not as a trophy, but as a record proof that justice could exist without noise, that grace could stand where vengeance once would have. In the quiet that followed, the rain softened against the glass. The city outside pulsed with new energy, women applying for funding companies, rewriting policies, people whispering her name as something more than success. Amina leaned back, eyes closing briefly. The world had changed its tone. From the street below, someone shouted up at the tower, "Thank you, Amina." She opened her eyes, a small smile returning. "Don't thank me," she said under her breath. "Just keep walking forward." The thunder faded. The lights of the city kept burning. And somewhere inside a gilded mansion miles away, Eleanor Kingsley sat in darkness, listening to the echo of her own silence, learning that sometimes redemption begins with losing the last word. 2 weeks later, the world had moved on, or at least pretended to. The Kingsley scandal had become case study material in business schools. The cost of arrogance, one professor called it. But behind the headlines, something else was shifting, quieter, slower, more human. At a community college on the south side of Chicago, a scholarship ceremony was underway. On the screen above the stage, the Arvia logo gleamed beside new words: the Amina Cole Fellowship for Leadership and Ethics. Students lined up, trembling with disbelief as their names were called. One of them, a young black woman named Janelle Price, stepped up to the microphone. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. "I used to think dignity was what you had after success," she said. "Now I know it's what gets you there." In the back of the auditorium, Amina stood quietly, no spotlight, no entourage, just watching. Nia stood beside her, whispering, "You could have taken the stage. They would have loved it." Amina smiled. "They don't need me on stage. They just need the mic." The applause swelled, filling the hall like a heartbeat. Meanwhile, at the Kingsley Foundation, the once feared, now fading empire, Eleanor sat in her office, dressed in gray instead of gold. Her desk was clear except for one folder: Arvia Partnership Terminated. She stared at it for a long time before standing. Then she picked up the phone. "Get me Miss Cole's office," she told her assistant. The line rang twice. "This is Nia Thompson. This is Eleanor Kingsley. Please tell Miss Cole I'd like to make a donation to her initiative. Anonymous if possible." There was a pause on the line. Nia glanced at Amina, who simply nodded once. "She says thank you," Nia replied. "Your support will help fund mentorship programs in underrepresented schools." Eleanor exhaled. "Good." Maybe that's how we start to fix what can't be erased. She hung up quietly. No cameras, no press release. Just two women on opposite ends of a call. One rebuilding, one atoning, each understanding that power, real power, was in the act of creating space for others. That night, Amina stood on the rooftop of her office watching the city breathe beneath her. Lights flickered like memories, some bright, some fading, all alive. Nia joined her, coffee in hand. You think they'll ever say sorry in public? Amina looked down at the skyline. They already did. Every time someone else stands up because they saw what happened, that's the apology I accept. She took a sip of coffee, the wind brushing against her hair. Let them keep their silence, she said. I've got better use for mine. Below, traffic lights pulsed in rhythm, and for the first time in weeks, she laughed, not from relief, but from recognition. Because somewhere between the outrage and the headlines, between revenge and restraint, Amina Cole had done what few could. She turned a moment of humiliation into a lifetime of legacy. 6 months later, the ballroom that once held humiliation now hosted history. The same chandeliers, the same marble floors, but everything felt different, lighter, honest, awake. Amina Cole walked in again, this time by invitation. The Kingsley Foundation had reopened the venue for a new purpose, the Global Ethics Summit. Irony had a sense of poetry. Reporters whispered as she crossed the room in a black suit that reflected nothing but resolve. The cameras flashed, but there was no scandal to capture, only completion. On stage, Eleanor Kingsley, thinner, grayer, but unflinchingly composed, stepped up to the microphone. The audience hushed. I was once the woman who mistook silence for weakness, she began. Now I understand it's the truest test of strength. Her gaze found Amina in the front row. This summit exists because of one moment and one woman who refused to fight hatred with noise. Miss Cole, thank you for showing the world that grace can be an earthquake. Applause rose, not explosive, but reverent. Eleanor stepped aside. Amina walked onto the stage. They didn't shake hands immediately. They just stood, two women once divided by class, race, and history, now joined by the knowledge that both had changed because one refused to break. Amina took the mic, her voice calm, deliberate. I didn't come here to be honored, she said. I came to close a circle. She paused, looking around at the same gilded walls that once echoed with laughter at her expense. Forgiveness, she continued, isn't forgetting what happened. It's remembering who you became because of it. A single light from the chandelier reflected on her face like a crown she didn't need to wear. When people ask me how it felt to lose that night, she said, I tell them I didn't lose anything. I reclaimed everything that mattered, my voice, my dignity, and the proof that silence, when rooted in truth, is unstoppable. Eleanor bowed her head. For the first time, Amina extended her hand. The moment the two women shook the room, exhaled a quiet, collective release of history. Maya Brooks, now a senior correspondent, whispered to her cameraman, this is the clip that ends the documentary. He nodded. It already feels like it. As the crowd stood applauding, Amina turned to them one last time. Don't wait for justice to be televised, she said. Live it calmly, daily, relentlessly. Then she walked off stage, no music, no escort, just the sound of footsteps marking the end of a story and the beginning of something larger. Outside, dusk fell over the city. The sky glowed gold and gray like a curtain closing on arrogance and opening on grace. And for anyone watching, one truth remained clear. She never raised her voice. She raised the standard.